Hello, and welcome to a special edition of the Social Security Update. I'm Charles Clapsaddle, Station Manager for Manatee Educational Television. And it's our pleasure to welcome back Daryl Rosenthal, the Public Affairs Specialist for the Social Security Administration, to talk about one of the key things that every citizen should know. Daryl, good to see you again. Thank you for coming and doing the program. Usually you're over here asking the questions, but on this particular edition, we're going to kind of do something a little different and focus on you answering some of the pertinent questions as it pertains to what women should know about their Social Security benefits.
That's correct, Charles, and thank you so much for having me on your show. The reason this topic is so important is because women live longer than men. They tend to have more years in retirement. And a lot of women, because of their role in society, they might not have had a job that gave them a pension or maybe gave them a 401k. So their Social Security seems to have more importance for their future finances than with men.
And you know, I think it's really important, and I'm glad that you mentioned women do have a longer life span than men do. So, you know, it's very important for them to know all of the ramifications of what they're entitled to under Social Security. But you know, let's touch on quite a few different things. First of all, how do you qualify as a spouse under Social Security guidelines?
Okay, first of all, you only qualify as a spouse if it helps you. And what I mean by that is the benefit only pays up to 1/2 of the other spouse's unreduced benefit. So if your own benefit is already going to pay more than that, then you don't qualify as a spouse. So for instance, let's say, not to be chauvinistic, but let's just say a husband could get $2,000 at full retirement age on that record. And let's say the wife could get $1,200 on her record at full retirement age. Since hers is already more than 1/2 of his, she would just collect on her own. But if hers was, let's say, $800 compared to his $2,000, half of his is $1,000, that leaves $200 more she can get as a spouse. So that's the first thing we look at. Will you actually be able to get more? Because otherwise, nothing else matters. But then there's some rules such as you have to be old enough. The spouse's benefit starts at 62, unless you have a child in care who's under the age of 16 or disabled.
I see.
And the longer you wait to file, your benefit increases. And then there's also benefits for divorced spouses.
Well, and that's a point that, you know, I just want to divorce and or marry. Why is it important or critical, really, to have a Social Security card if you have a name change? If you're married or you end up being divorced, if you change your name, why is it important for each iteration of that to have a new Social Security card?
The reason that's so important is because along with using your Social Security number to keep track of your earnings and giving you the credit you're supposed to get, that works in concert with your name.
See.
So if somebody, let's say at work, they didn't get their name changed, it's possible their earnings won't get posted correctly. So then they won't get to us. And then we keep track of your benefits and your earnings by also making sure that your name is posted, that we have it correct. So actually it's important enough that if somebody's going to file for retirement or spouse's benefits, if they haven't changed their name,
they might not ever get any of their benefits.
We're not going to be able to process the claim until they make the name change.
And the same would be, you know, whether you're being married or whether you're getting divorced and reverting back to a maiden name, it's always critical to have that Social Security card that is current.
And that is correct. We need that done.
But let me ask you this. If a person hasn't worked at all, you know, I mean, let's say they're married, they're raising a family, if they haven't worked at all, do they qualify for benefits?
They qualify for benefits as long as they meet all the other requirements. The age, been married long enough. One thing I wanted to mention too, if you're currently married, you have to be married for at least 9 months. If it was a divorce, you had to be married for at least 10 years before the divorce. And if somebody never worked, or they haven't worked enough to qualify for benefits on their own record, they can qualify as a spouse. Later on, they can qualify as a survivor. So they'll get, for instance, in the living situation, if you apply as a spouse, and half of your spouse's benefit is $1,000, at full retirement age, that's how much you could get. If you file earlier, it's reduced.
I see. So that's very important for people to realize that that there's different standards then, for being married. But funny thing that you mentioned, how do you qualify as a widow? I mean, how if you're married, your husband passes, and you've been together for a period of time, do you qualify automatically as the widow under the eyes of Social Security?
Okay, well, you have to apply. And one thing I wanted to correct myself when I said the marriage in a living situation is 9 months for the requirement.
Right.
That's 1 year. For the widows, it's 9 months.
I see.
So they would have to choose to apply for it. But if the person was married until the person died, they can later apply
For
as
survivor
a widow,
benefits.
for a survivor's benefit. One of the requirements is there's more time frames that come into play for the widows or widowers than for the in the living situation. For instance, they start basically at the age of 60, but if a person is disabled, at least 50, and became disabled within 7 years of their spouse dying, they can be eligible for the survivor's benefit at an early age. So you could be 50 or 53. And if it was a young couple that had a young child and one of them died, they can qualify at that early age. So if two 30-year-olds had an 8-year-old and one of the 30-year-olds dies, the surviving spouse can qualify at that early age. So you can qualify at different times, but if you're not with a young child,
I see.
and you're not disabled, it starts at 60.
Now, I just want to reinforce that all of this information, it's great to hear from you because you're very knowledgeable and you have a lot of grasp of the situation. But people can find out this information by going to the Social Security website. Is that correct?
That is correct, Charles. And that's a good point and something everyone needs to know, because we hope that everyone watches the show and gains a lot of information, but you're going to, even if you're watching, you're going to forget some things, and there might be something that's specific to you that you think about later. You get on our website.
It's very user-friendly.
Very user-friendly. We cover all the topics, such as spouses, survivors, disability, Medicare. And there's frequently asked questions, and with 60 million people getting benefits, most of the questions have been asked, and you can find the answers on the website.
And I think that's really important. We've got the information up on the screen, and I would suggest to people that if you do have questions about your account or your family's account or something that you want to find out more information, is to go to the website and kind of track that down. And if that doesn't give you enough information, there's offices around the country, around the area that can do it. And again, I just want to mention, Daryl, you've been very proactive in bringing information about Social Security to members of this community, Sarasota and Manatee, about a wide variety of issues, that affects Social Security. But let's get back on track here, if we can, for a minute. Let's talk about choices when you're a widow as compared to being eligible as a spouse. Tell us, how that measures up.
Okay. When you're currently married, you have to file for your own benefit first.
I see.
And then we see if you can get more as a spouse.
I see.
And if you're going to file as a spouse, you can only do that if your spouse has already filed or is filing when you file. So in other words, if you're the older one of the couple, and let's say you're 62 and your spouse is 58, and you eventually want to file on their record, but you want to get something at 62, at that point you would only file on your record. And then later on, when your spouse files, then we would take the spouse's application and you can get more money.
Well, and that's a very important point to know that you have to look at both of your work records and both of your applications to see what is applicable. Very good point. But I want to move forward. A lot of people in the United States, around the world, remarry, either through divorce or death in the family. How does remarriage affect spouses and survivor benefits? Because I think that's a key thing for people to know about.
Okay. Well, if you're a divorced spouse and your spouse is still alive, you have to be unmarried to collect the divorced spouse's benefit.
Oh.
If you were getting the benefit and then you remarried, that would disqualify you. You wouldn't get it any longer.
Oh.
When it comes to survivor's benefits, you're allowed to remarry after 60 and still qualify
For survivor benefits.
For survivor's benefits. And just to go back to your question about the choices, there's more choices with survivors. And when it comes to getting a Social Security benefit, you want to get the most you can.
Sure.
So it's important the choices you make, and there are strategies.
Yeah.
So while I said while you're currently married or you're filing as a divorcee, you have to file first on your own record. Then we see if you can get more as a spouse. So there's not really a choice there, except if you had an earlier spouse, you could also qualify on that record.
I see.
But in the survivor's case, there's more of a fundamental choice, and that is, let's say a person is already widowed when they're reaching retirement age.
Right.
So do they file on their own record, or do they file as a widow or widower? So here's one thing that the audience needs to know. Although we use the phrase full retirement age, actually, on your own record, the maximum age is 70. Your benefit goes up 8% a year for every year past full retirement age up to 70. So if your full retirement age is 67 and you file 12 months later, it's going to go up 8%. So that means these days, with the full retirement age being between 66 and 67, your benefit can increase by 24 to 32%.
In that period of time. That's,
right.
I mean, I think that's an excellent thing for people to know.
But that's only your own benefit.
Not your spouse benefit.
Right.
Not your survivor benefit.
The survivor's benefit, the most it's going to be is what the worker's full benefit would have been.
Right.
So therefore, if the two benefits are relatively close, you might want to get the survivor's benefit first, and then switch over and get yours at 70. That way you'll be getting the highest benefit for the most amount of time.
That's a really good point to think. So you have to really look at the balance and select the one that's going to be the most beneficial for you. That's excellent information, Darryl.
Right, and just a couple of other things with that. So if one benefit is way better than the other, they might just file for the better one first and stick with it.
Right.
If it turns out that the survivor's benefit's going to be better, if they want to retire before full retirement age, they can collect theirs first and then switch over.
Oh, you can.
To the
You can
survivors.
do that.
And there's even another strategy thing to think about. If your spouse receives or received a benefit before full retirement age, they filed for retirement early,
Right.
and then they die, you're never going to get 100% of what they could have received if they waited. You're going to get a percentage. It's going to be probably as high as 80-some%. So a couple, while they're still alive, trying to come up with the best strategy, if the one with the much better work history can wait to file to their full retirement age, if they die first, then the other one is going to be able to get potentially their full benefit.
That's excellent information, because that's something that I'm sure that people don't look into and examine as deeply as perhaps they should, is to kind of examine what those possibilities could be. That's great information, Darryl. But here's a good question, and I think this is something that people are very unknowledgeable about. How much can you earn and still receive benefits from Social Security?
Okay, there's actually 3 different time frames that we look at. If you are under the years of full retirement, so this year full retirement is 66, so that means 62, 3, 4, 5. There's a limit, It's more modest. This year it is $15,720. And if you go over that amount, we have to withhold $1 for every 2 you go over.
No kidding.
So for instance, let's say somebody goes over by $10,000. They make $35,720. And they work all year. We have to withhold half of that. So if they go over by $20,000, we have to withhold $10,000.
Wow.
And if their
That's
checks,
significant.
it is. So, and if their checks are $1,000 a month, they wouldn't get the first 10 checks, but they get the last 2.
I see.
So what happens if somebody has a much higher paying job? Let's say they're making $100,000 a year. If they work all year, they're not going to get any checks. But if they retire halfway through the year and they make $50,000, we have what's called a monthly earnings test as well, where we take that yearly amount, divide it by 12, and that's $1,310 a month. And if they make under that, they can still get paid. So if somebody retires at the end of June, they're not going to be working July through December,
That's right.
so they'll still get paid for those months regardless of how much they made for the beginning of the year. And that's the way the rules stay. And I should say also, we can only do that monthly test 1 year. So the next year, if that person that makes 100 goes back to work, we can only use the yearly math.
Well, let me ask you this, just for clarification. I mean, these are people that retire before the age of retirement. If you're over the age of retirement, and is there a thing for qualification for how much you can earn? Let's say that you're 69 and you're still working. Is there a test on that, or can
Actually,
you go ahead and earn that and still collect your Social Security?
At full retirement age, the month of full retirement, moving forward, you can earn whatever you want to earn. There's still another interim number,
Period.
though. Yeah, the year you reach full retirement. But before the month of full retirement, there's another limit. So let's say this year, somebody turns 66 this month. We care what they earn between January and October,
Right.
but the limit goes way up. It's $41,880, and if they go over that amount, we withhold $1 for every 3 they go over. So the year you reach full retirement, you can earn more money and you'll have less withheld.
Oh, I
So
see.
let's say somebody makes $58,880, they go over by $9,000, we have to withhold 1/3 of that, or $3,000. If they're getting $1,000 a month,
I see.
they wouldn't get the first 3 checks. They get the rest, and then this is the month they turn 66. So from this point on, they can earn whatever they want to earn.
I think that's really great information for people because you have people who are coming up on retirement age, from the baby boomer generation. It's really good information. Again, I would direct people to go and visit the website and see how those applications can apply to each individual case, and it's really good information. Couple of quick things because we're kind of running down on time. Let's say there's a couple, they have a business, small business or anything. How do they qualify if they're running the business together? Is there a kind of some specific information for Social Security on a couple running a business?
Yes, there is. First of all, I want people to understand just the basics. It's not hard to qualify for Social Security benefits. You have to work 10 years, and it's a very modest amount you have to earn every year. This year, if a person earns $5,040, they're going to get a full year's worth of work credit. And so if somebody's been earning $6,000 a year the last 10 years, they're going to qualify. So with that said, if a couple owns a business, let's say they're incorporated, one person sees themselves as the one in charge, and the spouse is helping them out. If the spouse isn't on salary and they're not paying Social Security taxes,
Then they don't qualify.
if they don't have other work
Right.
over the years, they're not going to qualify. If this same couple, instead of being incorporated, if they have a small business and it's self-employment,
Right.
so they're supposed to pay self-employment taxes, if only one does and the other one doesn't, once again, if the other one doesn't have other work,
Right.
they're not going to qualify. And this is important because although we've talked about spouses and survivors, there's also disability benefits.
Which is
So-
another whole thing that we
Right.
can talk about maybe at another time. But I think the key thing is that Social Security is based upon your work history and what you've paid into your Social Security account. So if you're a small business owner and you're you're working together, if you're not being paid, then it's not showing up in your account as part of your Social Security.
Exactly.
Right.
So if the strategy between the couple is, we're going to let person A get the higher earnings,
right,
great, I'll give them more of a higher Social Security benefit, but what about the other person? They might not qualify.
And this is the interesting thing, and I think, as you've mentioned several times, if you're married or anything, you have to look at some different strategies that are applicable for you for your best benefit. Now, here's a question for you, and I think a lot of people, as I said, baby boomers are retiring, at an increasing frequency. When you're planning a budget for your retirement, how can you find out if you'll qualify for a spouse's benefit? And that's, I think, is something, as people move forward in later life, how do they qualify?
Okay, well, first of all, it's easiest if you're currently married. Mm-hmm. Okay, because the couple just needs to look at their last two estimates. Mm-hmm. And if one of them is not more than twice as much as the other,
right,
then they're not going to qualify, at least in the current situation, for the spouse's benefit.
Right.
And if they're divorced, if they still talk, then one of them can ask the other one, what is your estimate going to be? Mm-hmm. And they can figure it out that way.
Right. It's excellent information. That's really good information.
Right.
Because you want to have that, because these are entitlement things that are, people should know about for each individual.
Right, and they can also look as far as the actual rules about being married long enough and at what age it starts. They can look on the website for that. Just click on survivors or click on spouses benefits, and they'll see those rules.
And I think that's really important, for people. While you're very informed and knowledgeable a lot of things, I think people should be able to go to the website, find out, and get into the detail, or contact your Social Security office. And there's a wide variety of people that can help them. Now, Daryl, unfortunately, we're kind of running out of time, but there's one question that I want to get to, which I think is kind of important. Your spouse is working at 65, and both of you are covered by either one of the spouse's work insurance. When can you or should you apply for Medicare? Because I think that's a lot of things. People are working longer now, and that's obvious, and there's a lot of coverage that's out there. But when do you apply for Medicare? And what are some of the challenges there?
Okay. Well, normally, if a person is 65, that's when you're eligible for Medicare.
Right.
And if you don't take the doctor's portion, Part B, there's a 10% penalty per year if you put it off and then take it later. Mm-hmm. So one exception to that rule is if you are working and covered by a group health plan while you're working. Mm-hmm. And at that point, Medicare is secondary, so you don't have to take Medicare at that point. Mm-hmm. And if your spouse is also covered through your work insurance, they also meet that same exception. They don't have to take Medicare right away.
Right.
And then the way it works is when you stop working, there's an 8-month period where you can then switch to Medicare, pick it up without a penalty or delay, and that would work that way for both spouses. We just suggest you contact Social Security a couple months before retiring, because there's a couple forms you need to get. And the important one is the one you take to your employer and get verification that it's for us, that you have received the health insurance from 65 through the time you're going to retire.
And I think that's great information too, because as people move towards their retirement age, they want to see if they're covered by an insurance within either their spouses or their own insurance. They want to make sure that they can qualify without having to pay a penalty. Now, Daryl, I think unfortunately we're a little bit running short on time. But I want to give you a moment to say, why is it important for women in general to be very knowledgeable about some of the specific issues that we've addressed today? Why is it important for women to know about these things?
Well, I think, as a lot of elderly women can tell you, they could be by themselves.
Sure.
And their spouses tend to die earlier. Yeah. So it is really important that they make the right decision, because they could be on their own for some years. So they want to be maximizing their benefit. And if I could just say before we run out of time, for those people that haven't received an estimate in a while, you can get an estimate anytime you want if you open up a My Social Security account, which you find on our website on the very first page.
Right. And that's very easy to do, is that you go to the very first page and you go to my account and you can open it right there. And some people are doing that and then they can see their work record and their benefits kind of laid out. Is that correct?
Correct. It's a
Yeah.
great customer service and planning
And
tool.
it really is.
Yeah.
But, and I would, say again to the Social Security Administration and to you, Daryl, this is a great community service that you're doing. This is an aging population in Sarasota and Manatee. And, people rely upon their Social Security. But I think one of the key things that you've mentioned today is how to maximize and how to strategize to use the full benefits that Social Security
Right.
has out there for their benefit, for their individual benefit. As a woman, as a man, it really doesn't make any difference. And I think it's very critical, for the Social Security Administration to have this kind of outreach and community involvement that continues to provide information for this community.
Well, I'm so glad that I've had the chance to talk to you, Charles.
Well, and what we'll do, Daryl, as we move ahead into 2017, we'll continue to do some other programs, which you'll be hosting again, I hope, to talk about some other issues that people will be familiar with. Again, the website is very valuable, and people can readily access that at any time. Is that correct?
Yes, they can also get to it on a mobile device.
Right.
It's just very convenient, always being upgraded, so it's more user-friendly.
But I would say, too, if you're an individual and if you have questions, you can always do that. If you want to talk to a representative, an informed and knowledgeable Social Security representative, they're available as well. Is that correct?
That is correct. Just really quickly to mention, you can file for retirement or spouse's benefit online, but as of now, you have to file for the survivor's benefit with a person.
So you have to go to a Social Security office and with one of the representatives?
Right, you'd make an appointment by calling the
Excellent.
1-800 number to either go in or have the claim taken over the phone. But at that time, you can ask all the questions, and you don't have to know whether you want to file as a spouse or a survivor.
They
Just
can
make
help you.
Exactly. If you think you might apply as a survivor, go ahead and make the appointment. We'll go over the numbers with you and give you the information so that you'll be better informed and make the best choice that you can make.
And the people at Social Security are there to help and to be informed and knowledgeable and make sure that you're getting the best benefits possible.
That is correct.
Daryl, again, thank you. I mean, the concept of a program of providing information and insight into the many things that Social Security provides is a great community service, and thank you for continuing to do this.
Thank you, Charles.
And thank you for joining us on this edition of the Social Security Update. If you have any questions, go to the Social Security website or give them a call, and they'll be more than happy to help you. And Daryl will be back with some more programs on Social Security in the coming year. Thank you for joining us. I'm Charles Clapsaddle for METV, and we'll see you next time.